Hello everybody and welcome to another pen review. We're moving forward in time, especially given that 2 videos ago we were back in the 1950s. This is a much newer pen. I believe it actually is still in production. It's from Conklin, as you can maybe see right there on the clip. This is what I call a Mark III Conklin, in that it's been produced after Jaffa took them over. Right? There was the original Conklin way back when. They were revived in the 90s, and then that revival was bought out by Jaffa sometime in the early 2000s. I don't remember exactly when. And there were quite a different set of pens that have been made, after that. And this is one of the newer ones. This is the Stylograph in this sort of, I don't know what you call that, finish wood grain, I think is what it's supposed to be called, but it's definitely blocks of brown and gray and so on. If we go over some of the pieces, at the top, in the finial there's the Conklin logo, but instead of being engraved or anything like that, it's sort of printed on a piece of silverish, not an actual piece of silver, but something that's silver colored, and then sort of under a clear sort of thing. So you have the logo sort of protected by that. The barrel and cap are very smooth to the touch. This is, whatever this is, it's got a lot of lacquer on top of it or something similar. It's very smooth, very polished. And you can see some of this, pearlescence or whatever you call it underneath the cap a little bit. But, there's whatever it is, the material is, and then there's definitely some coating on top of that. Silver cap band right at the end of the cap, which says Stylograph right there. Let's see if I can get the light to agree with me. That might be the best we're going to get. Stylograph right there, and then some crescent moons, which you see on a lot of Conklin stuff. And then this black thing in the back, which might look like a bit of a blind cap, but is just purely decorative. There's nothing going on there. Now this particular one has, as you can probably tell right there, it has a stub or italic or whatever you want to call it, a 1.1 millimeter nib. And these days with Conklin, that's a very plain nib. Let's see how close I can get this to the camera before it freaks out. Doesn't seem to want to focus on anything quite that close. There's a Conklin in a circle, and then it says Toledo, USA underneath. There's no scroll work or any of that kind of stuff. Just those two things. Nowadays the round nibs, the Conklin logo, I think has got some gold in it. But here this is just all chrome colored or silver colored or whatever color. We've got a plain black section, silver on each end. Silver on each end. This bit of silver is the cap thread, which there's not very much of it, as you can probably tell. So it doesn't take very long to unscrew or screw the cap on. There is quite a bit of a step down, so depending on how you like to hold your pen, that can be really annoying. I find it a bit obnoxious because that's usually right where I want to put my finger. So I tend to have to sort of adjust with this one slightly, move everything down a little bit, so then I get my fingers off of that thing right there, which is rather sharp. I mean, the threads, there's no way you can really get your finger on the threads because they're sort of blocked by this step down from the barrel. So that's kind of irrelevant. But the step down itself is pretty sharp. So I try not to have my finger resting on that if I can avoid it as much as possible. It is a cartridge converter pen. We'll just unscrew. Okay. Metal threads there again, so probably not eyedropperable as though anybody would try. And I don't know if you can really see inside there. There's the threads on the inside of that are metal as well. Hopefully you can see that sort of right there at the end of the cap. But the metal is not all the way down. You know, if I go down to, you know, it's just for the threads. It doesn't appear to be any other metal on the rest of the body. You can see it pretty well looks like that acrylic pattern, you know, is what's on the inside of the pen as well. It came in several different colors, as I recall. One was sort of more gray oriented. This one's a more brown oriented. There was also, I believe, a sort of a blue oriented one. This one is the brown. But it is just a lot of squares of stuff. Some of them are more, you know, what's the word, reflective than others, I guess. Now this is a Mark III, which means it doesn't have, at least I've not had, the same feed problems that I've had with the Mark IIs. You know, several of my, you know, sort of Mark II Conklins, in other words, before Yagafa took them over, you know, they would sort of vapor lock. You can write for a little while, you get maybe 2/3 of a page, and that air bubble would form, and you would just be stuck. And you would have to shake the pen, do something to the pen to get that air bubble to float back up to the top, and then you can get some more ink to come down. I've not really had that same issue with the Mark III Conklins. Like this one writes perfectly well. I haven't had any troubles with it. I have a Monteverde Artista Crystal, which is perhaps a little drier than I would like it to be, but you know, I haven't really had any issues with the feed keeping up. It does sort of start off wet and sort of fade back to normal as time goes on, but I have quite a few pens that do that. I don't think that's anything particularly associated with Conklin. All right, now this, because of this step down right here, I mean, that's as far as your pen is going to post. It posts really securely right to there, but you might expect this is a pretty large pen at that point. All right, you can. It seems a bit more because I have my camera fairly close to my hand. You know, it's only, you know, maybe not even a foot above my hand, so that's why this thing seems outrageous. If I put it down on the piece of paper, you can still see it's still quite long. You're not seeing a full 8.5 paper, but that's probably a good 5.5 inches, I would think, posted. So I will do it sometimes if I know I'm not going to write for very long. It's not actually that bad. The cap is fairly light because there's not a huge amount of metal in it, just right here at the edges, I think. So it doesn't backweight the pen as much as you might expect. It's actually fairly well balanced. It still feels like it would balance right about there, which is not too bad. That's about where it's going to rest. It's actually, you know, in my hand, so it's not, you know, it's not uncomfortable to use Post-it, I have to admit. You know, it is a bit unwieldy, and you do have to be careful with, you know, somebody sitting next to you, I suppose. But it's actually quite nice to write with Post-it. All right, now I've actually got some rhodium graph paper here, as opposed to the usual Walmart whatever graph paper, just to try and see if I can catch some interesting things with the ink, because this is a stub nib, so we'll see if we can get some effects. Well, I'll talk a little bit about how I like to write with the stub nib as we go anyway. So let's see, we have got, of course I say that I've not had any problems, there we go. That's what happens when you wave it around for 5 minutes while you talk about it. This is a Conklin Stylograph 1.1, and the ink is Pelican Turquoise. I hope you can see that. Now you can see I certainly started off, Pelican Turquoise does that a little bit anyway. I think that was exacerbated by the fact that I had the cap off and was waving it around for a while. So it's a bit more concentrated there than it is usually. Often we can get a bit of shading in there. I'm hoping the rhodia paper will help show that off some as we get going. Now this is a stub nib or a flat nib or whatever you call it. In other words, it's not, it's got a flat end to it instead of a sort of a round ball at the end. So what that means is that when you're going this way versus when you're going this way, you can get quite a dramatic difference in the widths of your lines. So how I tend to use this pen actually differs based on what I'm doing. I don't necessarily do a lot of printing, but if I'm planning to do printing with this pen, I will hold it, sort of straight on to the paper. This is maybe not the best angle to see at, but I mean just that flat end, I'm just holding it directly right at the thing, so that when I'm writing, say like a T, this way this is very broad and this is very short. When I'm printing, most of my strokes are, in one of those cardinal directions. I mean, there are some curves because there are things like O's in the world, but it tends to be a lot more up and down. And for that reason, I tend to hold my pen sort of straight on to the paper in that situation. Now, if I'm doing cursive, I'm not writing a lot of straight across or straight up and down. So instead of holding this pen this way, let me see if I can zoom in a bit. All right, they're going to take their seasick medication. I'm going to try this. Ooh. Craziness. Okay. So I was printing right at this angle, like so. If I'm going to do cursive, I'm going to hold this thing not straight on, but so that it's at an angle. And ideally, it's at the angle that I use to make my H's and my E's and my L's. So if I were going to make an L, that angle right there, where I would have my L, I want my pen nib to be in that angle. I'm going to sort of readjust everything. So this way I get sort of the maximum difference between, my upstroke, which is very thin, and the cross stroke when I come back down, which is as broad as that. So I have something like so. You notice I tend to, as when I'm doing my T's now, I'll tend to angle them at that angle that my pen is, rather than with my pen at an angle, rather than try and draw a straight across thing, which is going to be sort of awkward. I'm just going to do it at that angle that my pen is at, which helps to both make it look a little neater and give me a thin line, broad line differentiation. I have to admit I've had more hard starts in the last 3 minutes than I've had in the last 2 weeks with this pen. The nose is being filmed, apparently. All right, let me move this over some more. Okay. There's not really anything extra I can do for line variation. It's already there based on the shape of the nib. Right? I'm going to put it straight back down again. I've got across, I've got down, and I've got across. And that's just the way it is. There's nothing more I can push as hard as I want, and I'm not going to get anything different than what I've already got. All right, now I wanted to show, you can see this Pelikan turquoise is usually pretty good at doing some kind of shading effects, and there you can see it's starting to pool up a little bit in the bottoms there. And if I go back over, there's some bits of it here and there. If I try to go back over my original writing here, oof. There's a little bit of darker bit right there. Not as much as I was hoping to get on this thing, but still. All right, well, let me try back up here. And like I said, I've got my usual Walmart special graph paper down here. Let me see if that is going to help make this a little more user-friendly here. The downside is because this paper is so absorbent and we've got such a hefty nib on this thing, we are getting, you know, it sucks into the paper quite a lot. So there's probably going to be some, I apparently can't spell the word turquoise anymore, probably going to be some feathering if we look carefully at here. But I'm not getting the hard start issues that I was getting before either, so trade-offs that we make there. Yeah, and we're still getting a little bit of pooling going on. Again, with this paper, immediately sucks in. We can try it back with the rhodia. Color in, and then you can see it smears quite beautifully there. So it is a fairly wet pen. As I said, this paper tends to suck it up really quickly. And again, I can go straight back to here with no hard starts. So this nib is apparently not getting along with the rhodia today. All right, so that is the Conklin Stylograph. Now they have quite a lot of pens out there. The Stylograph is one of the more expensive ones out there at the moment, I believe. They have several that are a bit cheaper, quite a bit cheaper. The All-American springs to mind, and I forget what the other one is. It's sort of in that same, I want to say $40 to $60 range. Now, this one is a fairly long pen. The All-American, I believe, is also a very large pen. The third one, whose name escapes me, is somewhat smaller. So you've got quite a lot of selection. The nibs, as far as I know, all tend to be the same. They do have a bit of reputation for being a bit dry out of the box. That's, you know, I'm not having any troubles with, say, smoothness issues. I mean, this was, you know, even though this has no tipping on it, this one was perfectly smooth. As I said, my Artista Crystal was perfectly smooth, although a little bit dry. You know, so if you want it a little wetter, you can always make it a little wetter. There are plenty of tutorials for how to do that on the web. So all in all, you know, I'm reasonably happy with the way these Mark III Conklins have been performing. I may try at some point to try to fix one of my earlier Mark II ones, but at the moment it's just sort of sitting around. It looks pretty, but it's not very useful. But anyway, that's today's review. The Conklin Stylograph 1.1 stub, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.